This tree is one of my honeykiss trees, and they load up with fruit real good. But at this occasion, I want to point out that it is being held in traction with ropes to keep the limbs from the fruit. Over here, the fruit were down into the grass, and they needed to be up high enough so I could get the mower underneath it. And okay.
An early one.
And on the other side, I have a little grafted avocado under there. I didn't want it being damaged by fruit falling, so I put a ladder over it. But I also tied a rope up there to, well, let's see, we put the limbs in traction. Now, had I been careful and been pruning regularly so that the foliage where the trees bloom and set fruit was closer to the trunk, it would have been better preparation for hurricanes, which if you don't trim the trees, the hurricanes are going to do it, and they rather do it indiscriminately. So it's better to prune them and keep them shorter, closer to the trunk, where you don't lose a lot if you do have a storm break them up or take the leaves off. And that brings up the point of what do you do after a hurricane to help recover your trees? Well, in some cases, trees are blown out of the ground, or they're laid over and partially out of the ground. In a case like that, to save the tree, it's best to take off a lot of the foliage, because the roots are put in a position they cannot take up moisture from the ground unless they are, a hole is dug back there and the trees are set up. And then it still takes, it's quite a shock on a tree, but they can be set back up. But in the process of doing that, it's best to reduce a lot of the foliage on the top so the trees don't dry out and dehydrate. Now, there is this variety we call Terra Lay. That originated as a seedling in Terra estates. And the hurricane blew that to the point that there was only a limb, one root holding it in the ground. And the thought of trying to set that tree up in its location was kind of out of the question.
Yeah, too much work to do after
too many other things to do too. So what was done, we just took the chainsaw, my brother did, and cut the tops of the tree off and let the tree lay there. I don't remember if I think he just piled on top of it the trimmings that he had cut off, which was enough to shade it. The object is to shade the trunk from the direct sun that comes on it. As a tree grows, its leaves provide shade, but when it's not there, you have to provide a shade for it.
And plus, when you don't have the leaves, you don't have the movement of sap through the trunk. So, like some of these, like branches that have leaves, a lot of leaves at the end, that is going to be more resistant to the sun because there's that flow of sap.
There's a flow of fluid through there. And this had a big tree here. This is all shaded over by a very large tree here.
This is the ex-big tree here?
Yeah, this is the ex-big tree. That stump is still alive. I won't talk about that. We're talking about this shade that I took away from here. I didn't paint the limbs here because they were on the west side and a lot of leaves on them. I didn't think there was a great damage. And the other thing, which is sad to say, I will probably take this tree out to give shade for some avocados, because I'm tired of having to spend so much money on avocado fruit in the grocery store when I can grow my own of different varieties here. Yeah. So I'm working with that in mind. But this tree is a grafted tree onto a seedling that grew up here. I know it's got a good deep root system, and the variety that's on it is Venus. It bears very heavily and is very good quality mango, and I definitely wanted to save it. So before I cut this tree out, I painted the trunk of this tree white, and it will protect it from getting so hot that it cooks the cambium in it. It is important to do that right after a hurricane if you have limbs that are taken away and expose horizontal or nearly horizontal limbs to the direct sun. The way my dad illustrated the importance of it is when we had cows, and he had Holstein cows. He told me to put my hand alternately from the white blotches on the cow to the black blotches on the cow, and feel the difference. It's convincing. So, and we ended up having to paint the tops of the truck that we delivered trees in. We had to paint that white in order to be able to deliver trees that were not damaged from
all the heat
touching the inside of the uninsulated truck.
So yeah, that's you know, like sometimes, like you were talking about the terre laite, you know, sometimes you have major damage to a tree, so you have to provide some kind of shade or paint the trunk or all of the surface area white.
Right.
Some people collect a bunch of, you know, fallen branches and pile them up, and that works pretty well, but then the leaves dry out and they drop from the, you know, so you really have to keep an eye on it. But this is like, you know, you'd put it on there and you're good. You don't have to keep checking on it.
Yeah, when Dad had his grove on the east side of the railroad, and he was changing, well, he had a long row of carry trees because, well, they liked carry fruit, but we couldn't sell it. It was so bad I couldn't walk from one side of the, you know, I couldn't walk through the area without stepping on fruit. There were so many at a time.
Right.
But the point is, we had a lot of grafting to do, and when we cut the tops out to force the grafts, he say a lot of that top stuff he'd pile up around the lower part of the tree to save those, providing shade, that same principle. Now let's see, what else are we going to talk about here? Now this tree, I just let it grow. But if I were to try to save it, I would paint it and cut back probably at least the top 10 feet all the way around, so there wouldn't be any foliage left on it. But I'm going to take that tree out entirely. I want the avocados to grow.
Yeah, you're tired of buying avocados from the supermarket.
Yeah, yeah.